The member for Memramcook-Tantramar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In its throne speech, the government committed to establishing an all-party committee to develop a strategy that will meet our emissions targets by 2030. During the summer of 2016, the Select Committee on Climate Change toured around the province, hearing from New Brunswickers how best to meet these targets. The report of the Select Committee included 85 recommendations that were approved by all parties. We already know what we need to do. The government has been moving too slowly and risks being on the wrong side of history as a result of inaction on climate change. Can the Premier explain why it is necessary to create another committee to develop a strategy to meet our emissions targets when an all-party committee of the previous legislature has already done so?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, it's interesting. You know, since being in office for 2 weeks or less, we've met with the department several times, the Department of Environment, and gone through what was existing. You know, what is sad, Mr. Speaker, is that after all this time, that work that's been done by departments had not being used and put forward. We will be proposing with the Green Party and hopefully the Liberal Party as well as the Alliance, a carbon plan, a non-tax carbon plan in terms of employees or people of the province. But the idea, Mr. Speaker, is we're going to meet the deadlines to put a plan together while at the same time continuing to fight a new tax on people in this province. But the past work that's been done, the departments have shared with us the climate action plan that exists. I don't intend to reinvent that. I do intend to work with them and work with other provinces to get what's right for New Brunswick. And I want to work with my colleagues on both sides of the House because we must get the right plan for New Brunswick while at the same time meeting the targets that have been put forward, and I'm anxious to do just that, Mr. Speaker.
Le député de Kent-Nord. Le député de Memramcook-Tantramar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to the full implementation, the quick implementation of the climate plan. And Mr. Speaker, New Brunswick's Climate Change Act lays out our carbon emissions targets. We must reduce emissions to 10.7 megatons by 2030. This compares with the federal emissions targets of 14.3 megatons by 2030. In 2016, New Brunswick's emissions were 15.3 megatons, showing there is still work to be done to achieve the province's legislated goals. Meanwhile, the Premier has stated that he wants to revive the Energy East pipeline, even suggesting that it could initially be proposed by a government-owned holding company. This will allow for increased production at the Irving refinery and will increase New Brunswick's greenhouse gas emissions. Can the Premier explain what steps his government will take to meet New Brunswick's legislated 2030 carbon emissions targets of 10.7 megatons?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you for the question. Firstly, some clarification. In the case of the refinery that you mentioned, no, it won't change the emissions at the refinery. It will replace foreign crude oil. That's what it will do, Mr. Speaker. So we should clarify that point. It'll allow us to use our own resources here for our own facilities while at the same time being able to export and get, as we've seen, our commodity pricing up, Mr. Speaker, because we're losing billions in natural resources here in our country. Now, on the other point, the target is actually 14.3. That has been a target that was extrapolated based on the federal targets. That is our target, Mr. Speaker. The 10.3 that the member opposite refers to is an aspirational target that was set here that, and the carbon plan was put together, was we hope to achieve this target. So let's be clear on what targets we are obligated to meet and what targets we would like to meet based on implementation of a plan in New Brunswick. The target is 14.3, and I've been given all kinds of information on that, so I'm very comfortable in saying that. And the aspirational target is the 10 or 10.3, whatever that in that vicinity. So we need to be sure we're clear on the right targets, but then we make it happen.